Very quickly, I would like to invite our next moderator, and they would focus on commercial offices and further look at sector performance, tenant and occupier demand, as well as developing resilient and competitive assets, the green building premium and flexible offices. I'm really excited about our moderator because I think she's very passionate about this particular conversation. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome the managing partner at Catalyst Realty Solutions and her panel to unpack further. Please let's make welcome Chingwe Sanya for this conversation. Thank you very much. You see why I say she's passionate about it, because she already raised a question on green building. So I'm looking forward to a truly insightful conversation. Please let's make her feel welcome with another round of applause. Thank you. She'll come up stage to bring up other members of this lovely conversation. Thank you very much, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you very much for that. And together with me, the rest of the panelists include Yemi Stevens with Estate Links, and then we have Linda Ogudili, who's with Africa Works, and we have Topé Fashion Law with Knight Frank, and Topé Runsewe Wudutun. Okay. Great, so we will just go ahead and get started. So we were sitting down, I guess for lunch. During lunch, we were actually having a conversation about commercial office space. Because a number of you all I know, we were all colleagues in this space, and we've come to a number of WAPI conferences. If not WAPI, API, we've met in these spaces several times. And one of our immediate observations, which is a sign of the times, is the fact that normally, a couple of years ago, commercial was top center of the agenda, usually at the conferences for years. And as we can see, it's past lunch and we're discussing commercial, which is probably a sign of what is happening with COVID. It's like a testament to the sentiment that exists out there. And so the very first question, and I'm actually going to open it up to all and then start targeting certain questions to different people, is basically talking about the COVID crisis. And I'm sure we all were engaged in discussions either with your clients or with your investors. What is going on in the office space? Are we going to work from home? Is that going to be our new reality? Are we all coming back to the office? Is the office here to stay? And if that is the case, in what capacity, in what structure? So please share with us what are your observations. I'll start with you, Yemi, since we already have started this debate.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Chinwe. Well, we're back to the office. Everybody's back to the office. If you go to, the whole of AI now, the traffic is back. But the funny thing about it is, yes, we're back to the office and the commercial space is still suffering. It's still struggling. Yeah, unlike before, that we used to have the large demand for large floor plates, 1,000 square meters, 1,500. You don't have all that again. So people learned during COVID that you could actually work from a small space or even work from home and be productive and make money and cut your costs. So after COVID, all the 1,000 square meters, 5,000 square meters were no more in vogue. People were looking for a very small space to operate from and cut their costs. And that's what we still experience in the market up till now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that intro, Chinwe. Nice to be here. It's a pleasure to be here. Um, I think from our end, we've actually seen a lot of offices, a lot of companies coming back to the office. But what would be ideal for us to mention is that the nature of work now is more of a hybrid solution, as against, full-fledged occupying the typical 1,500 or 3,000. The hybrid solution is where you have a mix of remote working and in-office working. So we have a lot of our clients or a lot of our members now seek for solutions where they are in the office maybe twice a week or 3 times in a week, and the rest of the week they have the time to work from homes. What has also instigated that is that we are social beings, and we've seen that a lot of times we like to still have proper meetings in person, and so we have a bundle package in our co-working space that actually gives you access to use the meeting rooms, for such period of times. You don't have to actually be members to have access to the meeting rooms. So we actually have products such as the meeting rooms, the flexible offices that gives you access to use the space maybe twice or 3 times in a week. And that's what we've seen in our space.
Thank you for that. I'm happy to be here. So I'm going to speak from 2 perspectives. The first is directly from the perspective of what we are seeing as construction service providers, and the nature of the bids and tenders that we're beginning to receive. Just looking across the spectrum, where normally we would, if we received, say 10 tenders before as a construction company, maybe about 40–50% of it will, one of them will be, 40 to 50% will be building an office space. That was maybe 5–6 years ago. But in the last 1 or 2 years, that percentage has probably dropped to about 1 out of 10, right? And so if I speak from that perspective, it shows directly that people are coming to the realization that the demand for office, so just like what, from Estate Intel's, Yemi said earlier, that, whereas before if you were using 2,000 square meters, you still need some space, but now you're saying, look, we don't need 2,000, let's just do 500. So that obviously is trickling down to people like us who provide the construction services. So what we are finding now is that a lot of what we are providing for in terms of construction is a lot of mixed use. People are trying to, rework the system so that in the same building you have co-working space, in the same building you have a play area, in the same building you could probably live. And then more interestingly is that they want the buildings to even be flexible. So you could finish building and then suddenly they want to turn it into a hospital, right? So they want even the design to be such that what you have designed for, even after we start building, we can make some adjustments as we go along. So we're seeing a lot of that even for us who are contractors who provide construction services. That is on one side. On the second side is that even the office spaces and commercial spaces and the way they are being used now is everyone wants to maximize every square meter. So people would rather have a space where you're sharing than being the full owner. And I think the trend is probably going to go on because, for example, if you look at, I don't know the stats, but I'm sure that banks are probably the highest users of commercial spaces generally, right? But now, I can't remember the last time I personally was in a bank building. So when banks start to cut back, and it's beginning to happen, on their total amount of, space for their banking halls, because everything is now digital, that is even going to have a further on effect on commercial spaces very, very soon. So I know people will still keep going to the offices, but it is obvious that the dimension in which that's going to be is changing, and it's changing very fast.
So good afternoon, everyone. So I would just like to add to what the other panelists have said, and it's very clear that the office market, right, for us in West Africa is going to be resilient, right? We've seen it being resilient over time, where we expected the worst to have happened, and yet what we see today is quite on the other side. What do I mean by that? As during COVID, people expected that what we'll have as a new norm will become people working from home, and working in offices will be a thing of the past, right? But today you will agree with me that the fears people had didn't come true fully. Why? Because you know, the experience we have is that working in Knight Frank, we've seen situations of inquiries for office spaces from different corporates, you know, multinationals, even to the extent that just in the last week, we concluded one transaction, right, of one of our grade B properties for an industry or for a client who operates in the manufacturing space. And why am I saying this is because people will need space. We are very physical people, right? And talking equally from a valuation perspective, right? There is the issue of data security, right? People don't want people to take valuations on their personal systems to keep those information and work with it, right? A lot of organizations that are structured, right, would have policies that needs to be revised to ensure that work from home or work from anywhere, as people will put the hashtag to be, is properly fitted. So what are we trying to say in essence is that there are still the projects coming up. However, there is a slowdown in the market across West Africa, right? So what we saw was that during COVID, there were pipeline projects that were going on. And so what developers did was to complete those projects and hold on to new projects that they have in mind to have a watch and look position to it. If you ask me to look into the screen of what we expect for the industry, I will say that we expect maybe a steady pickup, right, of the space, and not so much of people not wanting to stay in offices again. And another thing we need to equally note is that an organization that has a 400 square meter space and has office of its CEO, office of its CFO, whether the CFO works 2 times in a week, right, or 3 times in a week, his office space still remains what it is, right? So in terms of even trying to use, you know, one of the problems our market has is data gathering, right? So it's easy for us to jump on other people's emotions or sentiments to drive the market, and over time this becomes a picture that we see everywhere. But even in the space reduction, right, I think, in my own opinion, that because we are very traditional people in Africa, the CEO will keep his space, the CFO will keep his space, even if he decides to work 3 days in a week or 2 days in a week. What I then see happening is that lately, because I did a valuation of a particular building somewhere in Banana Island, and walking through the building, I said, oh, why is this floor closed? And I was told that people who use the office come very much later at night to work. And what that tells me is that we are now beginning to see certain roles, right? Content creators, right? I don't imagine myself to be an HR, try to employ a graphics designer full-time, a content creator full-time. So we are beginning to see some of the roles becoming friendly, more friendly to work from anywhere, right? You can be in Nigeria and be working in the US, right? All you need is Meet Linda to get you a co-working, you know, space that you can work from. So these are directions that we are seeing in the market. The market is resilient. I think it may be different in other parts of the world, maybe in Europe, but for us in Africa, what we've seen is that developments have slowed down. However, pipeline developments have been completed, right? And we see a steady pickup over time. And new sectors will emerge such that they won't need physical spaces they won't need the traditional physical spaces to work. They'll be comfortable to do a co-working arrangement, and they are fine with that. However, there are certain roles that will still have to resume in the office. Even in the advanced countries we are talking about, manufacturing sector is one of them. You know, I work in the built environment. Inspections, I don't know. You have to come to the office to do that. You know, working from home has its own challenges, right? Like I mentioned, for us, data security is a key thing, right? That we highly protect clients' confidentiality because of the agreements we have. And yeah, so I think COVID or no COVID, what might have changed perceptions of things, you know, it happened coincidentally that we had a boom at a period and a fall in economic progression, right? And we mixed it up to say that it's COVID that caused it. I think the economy globally slowed down for many reasons, for oil prices that crashed. Many oil servicing companies had to sack their employees, laid them off because they didn't have new projects coming up, right? Those offices became vacant over time. People will say, oh, are people working from home? Why are these offices vacant? No. So it's on a case-by-case basis. For some, it's the global economy that is slowing down, that is shrinking the spaces. And it's not only the commercial office space that is affected. It's there in the retail, it's there in, you know. So I think I would like to stop here so we have time to talk on many other things.
Okay, thank you so much for those insights. And you've brought up a number of issues about change, the requirement for flexibility, the requirement for, even as you're doing development, you never know when a change, a scope could completely change. And so you have to keep that in mind even when you're doing your development. So the next question I do have then is regarding, now that we have come into post-COVID Nigeria, Yemi, what class of offices are appearing to be the most resilient and why?
Okay, thank you, Chinwe. I think they've actually, substantially answered this question. You see, what the A-grade purpose-built office buildings are actually struggling at the moment. So the resilient ones are actually the B+, B minus B. Okay, I'll term my office as a B+ building. We're at Oniru here, and we're on about 1,700 square meters. And we have about, maybe about 4,000 square meters or thereabout, but partitioned into like 200 square meters. So before COVID, we used to have long list of people interested in taking up space within the building. Then COVID happened. Then after COVID, 2020, 2021, we were actually struggling. We had about 400 square meters that we put banners at, in front. In fact, we're actually changing banners. One will be tattered and we have to change again. People were not even making inquiries. But early 2021, then 2022, early 2022, started having a whole lot of inquiries. Now, prior to that, we had to partition one of the 200 square meters, to have less than, of course, you will have to create a passageway. That's a loss of the landlord to us, but we created that. Then we had about 70 square meters on one side, then we have about 60 or thereabout on the other side. So it was, we had to do that for us to be able to have the tenants that would take that kind of a space, because that's what they were asking for. 60 square meters, 100 square meters, 70 square meters. That's what they were asking for. Nobody was asking for even the 200 square meters. So immediately after we did that, then we started having inquiries for 150 square meters, 100 square meters. Now, how much is the rent? 50,000 naira per square meter, 55,000 naira per square meter, not dollars.
No more dollars.
Not $500 per square meter, not $400 per square meter, right? So people started looking in that direction. So opposite Landmark, that's at the Diolu Estate, we had a block of purpose-built office space there too. And we started having inquiries. Meanwhile, we're into all these A-class buildings. I don't want to mention names. all these A-class buildings that we're not even having any inquiries at all, even up to now. So the large floor plates, the 1,000, there's a particular one that's the floor plates of 1,000 square meters that we have advised that, look, you need to cannibalize this space, for you to have multiple floor plates within the main office, for us to be able to let. Even as that, we're still struggling to let. But the big class office buildings, you have people making inquiries, people coming back to so it's for us, it's the big class office buildings that they are quite resilient. And again, we've seen a situation where people are actually migrating from the purpose-built office buildings to detached houses, maybe in residential, yes, in Lekki. Now, you'll be able to bid down your cost. See, diesel is a leveler now. Yeah. I mean, from 300 to 800 overnight. So you want to, just drive down your costs drastically. So you can actually control your costs if you are within the space that you can run yourself. Yeah. You run the facilities yourself instead of being a purpose-built office complex. So that's what we've seen a whole lot of that. We've actually relocated people from the purpose-built office complexes to all these detached houses, with most especially within Lekki. So you can actually come to the office in the morning, resume 8 o'clock, and even close 2 o'clock. And again, what they do is they now put, this is alternative energy. They line the roof with solar panels, and you have your inverter. So you can time the time you put on your generator. So we're seeing a whole lot of that. So back to your question, grade B, quite resilient because, like Tope said, everybody is back to the office.
Yes.
Everybody. There's no office you go to now that you don't meet people.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's just about the same. The A-class buildings are dominated in dollars. We're not having traction.
Okay.
And that's the gospel truth.
Okay. So clearly, the trend is moving to B plus offices or residential conversions, and moving away from the larger floor plates to smaller floor plates, and flexibility is what people are seeking for. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Linda, because when we're talking about flexibility, that's what the whole co-working trend is all about. Can you tell us what you have observed in terms of the co-working trend over the past year or 2 years, and how you envision that will evolve over time?
Okay, just as Yemi rightly mentioned, we've noticed or we've seen that large corporates are not in the space of taking the usual size requirement, say 1,000 to 1,500. What they are asking for now, or what the request now is, we usually get between 100 to 250 square meters of space. And we actually have a product that addresses that need. It's called the Enterprise Solution, where we actually customize our office space to meet your basic requirements. We incorporate your brand guidelines to give you more like your space within the co-working facility. Okay. We've noticed that a lot of offices or a lot of corporates do not want to get in the discussion of having to fit out their offices, having to manage the services, having to now handle administrative office charges. And so they just want someone to pass on that, that whole expense to. And so we have come in to mitigate this. We've provided a solution for that, which we call the Enterprise Solution. We started off with the first block in our building. We have two major members occupying that space, one in the entertainment industry and the other in the logistics industry. We are opening up the second block by the end of the year, and I dare to say we're already full with that.
Bravo.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So with that, from a developer's perspective, given what Linda is talking about for co-working, how are you working on incorporating that within your designs? Or is that something you are currently doing? And I imagine there may be a struggle with that. So how are developers responding effectively to this co-working trend?
So, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the buildings that we're seeing now is already incorporating the flexibility even into the design. So right from the design, you're seeing more just open spaces within the design, and then putting the facilities and the utilities along the walls. So you have an entire open space, utilities along the walls, and then that open space provides the flexibility to whoever is going to take it up to do whatever they want to do with the space. So we're seeing a lot of that in what we're beginning to put out there. And just like Yemi and Lillian said earlier, I think even when we're finding office buildings, is not the grade A office buildings that are being developed and built anymore. And I'm thinking, I mean, I'm not an estate valuer or surveyor, but just putting together what Yemi and Lillian said, I'm suspecting that the people who used to take the grade A offices are the ones who have now become Lillian's new customers.
Yes,
because,
sounds like it, yeah.
you know, they still want that hands-off approach where I don't need to think about fuel, I don't need to think about this, but they don't want to pay dollars, right? Because there's no dollars anywhere anymore. So the economy is affecting it, not just COVID, the economy is affecting it, like what Okwe said, and, you know, people's tastes are changing according to the size of their pockets, right? So it is not the fact that people don't want to go back to the office, it is the fact that the economy is determining what people are able to show interest in. So in the same vein, you're finding a lot of residential conversions. We're getting requests for residential conversions being turned both into single user offices or shared offices as well, where a residential building would then be turned to, you know, where people would just say, okay, I only need one room in the building, and 5 people share the entire building, and they've turned the individual rooms into their individual offices, and then they use a space downstairs as a shared conference room, you know. So a lot of those kind of demands are the things we're seeing also in our space.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that. So Tope, my question, so moving along to the next, one of the, I guess, next topical trends that we're seeing is the rise of prop tech and technology and innovation in the space, in fact, prop tech and the rise of technology innovation in real estate in general. But since we are focused on the office sector, I guess my question is, what are your observations? What role have they played? Examples of trends that you're seeing even in the prop tech space?
Interesting. So when we talk about prop tech, right, and technology generally, with regards to office, the office industry itself, or the office market, you would look at it in 2 ways, right? You will either want to look at it from the transaction perspective, you know, and when we talk about the transaction side of it, we are talking about starting from when you want to get your office down to you moving into it, right? And the living in the office, or being an occupier in that office, right? Your experience, what do you feel? How do you relate with the space you have gotten, the office space-wise? So the prop tech, you know, goes through these different stages of it. You know, it has influenced the way you look for spaces. You know, I can remember back then when you were looking for an office space, what you do is you tell an agent, please, can you help me find XYZ, you know, space requirements, and you do that. But now you have online platforms, right? These are prop tech solutions, yes, right? You will agree with me that have become very handy and useful to prospective tenants in getting spaces, and even people who want to relocate their spaces, right? So prop tech has influenced from the occupation side, getting it, or either you want to even buy it, right? You can see the features of prop tech along this line. And like I said, it's not just we're not going to look at it from one angle to say just the tenants. Equally, the landlord is equally there. And remind you, based on our earlier discussion, to say that people want to come to the office after COVID, right? You need to make the office in such a way that is tempting enough to bring people back, right? And one of the things that we saw after COVID is that landlords became more innovative, right? Not only with their rentals that they're asking for, but the way their spaces were rendered, right? And we can say that the narrative is gradually changing. And what do we mean by saying the narrative is changing for office spaces? I will make reference to the past, you know, because the best way we can drive home this message is to talk about what we used to enjoy and what it is now for us, right? Someone who wants to take a space would only be concerned about the space he wants, and the agreements are pretty much straightforward, right? But nowadays, space occupiers are more concerned about the service. They don't see the space as XYZ square meter. They are asking questions about, is this space going to provide me with the service I want, right? And you will agree with me that PropTech has equally played a very useful role in this direction. We now talk about access security cards to enter offices, right? That's you using it to ensure safety. The other day, I went to a client site for a meeting, and I used to remember in those days, right? You will see a book being brought out for you to sign on. You will write your name, your company you're coming from, your document, and at the reception, there is a small robotic, device that was, just looking at me, and I had to put my signature, put everything in on that device. So you would ask me, it becomes a very competitive market. If I'm looking for space and I get to an office where at the reception I'm seeing a stand, an electronic device to sign in and have my name, have my picture. Are you a first timer in this building? I say, yes, I'm a first timer. They take my picture before going up. The lifts are controlled. You can't, because that equally happened when we went there. We went to the 9th floor, if I'm right, and we wanted to go to the 6th floor, right, to see a friend, right, and we could not. The lift, refused us, so we had to go down to reprogram our card. So you can say this is the influence of PropTech along the office space, and we will expect to see more, right? Landlords they are positioning themselves to ensure that they deliver a product that is differential, that will, spot them out and will distinguish them in the market. If you want to run in the space, you have to run well. Also, another thing you may want to look at it from is that half of the world's population, right, falls within the millennials and the generation Z, right? And these people look at space in a more flexible manner, right? My namesake, Mr. Tokwe, has alluded to that. So these people are more interested, who are the CEOs of companies, right, and decision makers in this company. They fall within this generation, right? So if the office space is moving from one generation to the other, right, we need to move away from the traditional way by which things are done, by which offices are being built, to something more flexible that can attract them. And in doing that, some of these things come in. So just to round up on my points on that, even on the management side, because one of the service line we have as Knight Frank is the property and facilities management arm, right? And we've seen situations where complaints are no longer lodged to the property manager alone on site. There is a QR code, there is a platform, you can just, snap on the properties we manage and lodge your complaint. Okay. Download your pictures of whatsoever leakages you have, and that is being registered. So it's becoming an off-site thing with technology, that you don't need to manage these offices any longer from you sitting in those offices. You can, do that outside the office. So the future is bright. Nigeria is a leading country in Africa, right? We lead the pace for the space, and we will see more of these solutions technologically coming out from the country to drive the space.
Thank you very much for that. I guess there are a few other questions I had, but I would always like to get different perspectives of thoughts regarding this. So we've spoken from a tenant's perspective. I would love to get your thoughts, Topper. Are there examples from a landlord's perspective? Thank you so much. Just some of the innovations that you're seeing that more and more that you're incorporating in your business, in your development? Is it making a difference in terms of helping you attract tenants? And then I have a similar question also for you in the co-working space. Are there some technology innovation that you're incorporating? Because everyone is like, you're right, the market is tightening up. We need to find ways to be creative to bring tenants in. So what are you looking at? What have you seen that is working? And maybe some quick examples.
Right, thank you. So in the prop tech space, so I'll speak generally and then try and narrow down to some that are specific to commercial space.
Yes, please.
Right? So starting with developers, and we have some of the prop techs here at this summit. There are prop techs who are helping construction companies and developers to make their procurement processes more efficient, where you can now go online, you get a portal that you're able to compare prices of materials that you normally, so basically they're trying to formalize an informal, previously informal sector where you don't need to go to the informal construction materials market. You can basically see it on your system and even have people bid for different things that you want to buy. So trying to help the developer and the construction company save money. So there are platforms like that. Here at this conference, LiveVen does that. It's not trying to advertise for them or anything, but I mean, you're asking for examples that we're seeing,
yes, exactly.
right? So that is in our own direct space. Then in the area of the landlords, there are different technologies now that help people to rent houses and pay on a monthly basis, and also to split up the spaces. In a big space, then you split it up and you're able to pay in smaller installments as opposed to paying annually. We're seeing that a lot in the residential, but I imagine if it has not started happening already, it would also start happening in the commercial space, because it makes sense that if you're able to rent a house and pay on a monthly basis, then you should be able to also rent an office and pay on a monthly basis, which would then be very similar to what the co-working spaces teams are doing. So we're seeing that also, revolutionizing the space. And I think this just goes to the fact that things that many never thought were possible are becoming very possible with technology.
Yes.
Because what the portals and the apps and the platforms do is that they then have algorithms that are able to do background checks on people before they are giving them spaces on a monthly basis. And I've heard that the default rates are very low, very, very low. So it means that there's something that is definitely working in that space.
So in that case, and of course it's commercial we're talking about, but this is a tool that works very well in residential. So maybe there could be a rise of a mortgage industry if you're talking about the algorithm that
Absolutely.
can do a KPI on people.
There's actually a company, I can't remember their name. I was in a conference where they spoke about mortgages specifically, and they're trying to do exactly the same thing, help people get mortgages through a system that is largely technology based, which will be linked to, now we have all these credit bureaus already, and most of them are heavily driven by technology. So the same way you're able to, all this rent money and the rest of them, you're able to do on your phone and just, they're also working on the same to be able to do for mortgages, right? So things are happening and they're happening very fast, and technology is a big enabler of that.
Great, thank you so much for that, Tope. So Linda, maybe you can share your thoughts on some of the technology that you're incorporating. I mean, one of the greatest benefits is that flexibility, which is what people are looking for. The monthly, and I assume that those are kind of features that you have within co-working space. Maybe talk a bit about that quickly, as well as maybe any other innovation that has not been mentioned yet.
Okay, thank you for that, Chinwe. So for in our own, okay, thank you. Okay, talking from our own space, I think one of the things that we have started doing is to incorporate access control features in all our spaces. So our entrances are heavily controlled. We give our members the access card to be able to log in and have access to their spaces. That's one of the features that we have begun, from inception. We already have that, and then we'll continue to roll that out. Another thing I would like to mention is in terms of operation, we're rolling out an app that will help our members in terms of operations, in terms of, having conversations on their everyday needs, rather than having to come to the office to make a request or to make a booking, they can just do it over the app. So that would actually ease off, the backlog or the waiting list of having to, meet someone physically. So that's also another technology that we're bringing in. And then I think the last thing I want to mention is in line with the flexibility. I mean, the co-working space, or one of the positives of the co-working is that we actually allow for flexibility in terms. So you actually can take up contracts that run on a month-to-month basis, and then just something that suits your requirement. If you also want an annual contract, oh, definitely we'll give you an annual contract. But we're actually now seeing a very huge request in terms of day-to-day uses, because a lot of people do not want to make long-term commitments, but they want to be able to come in and use the space as at when due. So we're beginning to see such requests now, and we also have the capacity to take on that. Then I also lastly want to mention that we currently have also opened up our One Africa Pass, because our members have constantly mentioned to us the need to be able to use our spaces across Africa. We're a Pan-African company, by the way, and so we are located, or we actually have about 10 spaces in 8 cities in Africa. And so there's a need to have that product where, if you're a member in Nigeria and you somewhat find yourself in Ghana for business ventures, you should be able to use the Africa workspace there. So the One Africa Pass is something we're rolling out this month, and our members are excited to get on it.
Okay, for me, I think essentially what has been largely deployed by almost all the real estate practitioners, the sourcing for properties, online. Well, prior to that, we used to have, it was only Castle magazine, yes. So if you're sourcing, you must look for Castle. But now, you can actually go online, look for, there's so many of them. Of course, it's also the security risk. Now, the deployment of prop tech, it is kind of expensive though. Now, the deployment, it is not that heavy yet. I'm saying that because you can't do, for now, you can't source for property online, do inspection online without seeing the property and pay for the property. You will have to see the property, physically. You still have to take you for inspection. Okay, but I attended a conference, and someone there's this, I think it's called Metaverse. It's still, I think it's still in the offing. I don't know why it's still, but then they were still like trying it out. So I was actually taking on the virtual tour of a property, and I could actually put on the light in that building. Right, and it's like miles away from where we were. And I was put in that space. We went through the old property, the fitted everything, asking questions, and they just put a thing on my face. So I was seeing everything. So I could actually conclude transaction based on that alone, without even seeing the property physically. Yes. So I believe we're getting there. Yes. So, though, like I said, quite expensive. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for that. Actually, now that you mentioned, I cannot remember the name of the company, but I remember the name of it's Lukman Edu, for example. I know he has, and I've seen it, where some of the properties here, you could actually virtually see and do a complete tour of the building. And it's exciting because I actually remember him sharing that technology with me, and that was even before COVID, so I can only imagine years later what that would be like. I'm running out of time, and of course, clearly you can tell from the questions I had earlier, I love to talk about green. You cannot talk about commercial, and you can't talk about tenants, especially international corporates currently, where there is a push of this topical issue. So really quickly, because I've already been told I've run out of time, can you just share your thoughts briefly about the green building from your perspective, from Knight Frank, from your perspective, Tope, from as a developer, co-working, and we'll end with Yemi in terms of dealing with tenants. Can we do that really quickly, hopefully, because they're already holding us up. Sorry.
Okay, so very quickly, right? Luckily for us, the session we had before ours had set the tone right, you know, about net zero. So just to add on what that panel has said, because we are speaking to the same audience, right, is the fact that when you talk about green, right, there is a part of you trying to be socially responsible. However, there is a part that tells you you are saving something in the long run. We should not take our minds from that. Green, so being green, right, is an investment for us, right? It's an investment that helps us to save in the long run. It may be costly to build green, right, because these things are expensive. However, when you look at today's economy where the diesel cost, inflation in operating costs has been driven upwards, right, you will agree with me that one of the key things that any tenant will look forward to is to ensure that they have a lower operating cost while in the building, right? So even if you don't want to be socially responsible, right, there's a profitability side of it that we need to be conscious about.
So
and it will help our bottom line.
are your clients asking for green? Are you recognizing a trend where your clients are also requesting for green?
Well, what I've come to discover also is that it is expensive, and
Yes.
it is only those that are ready to pay for that premium that can get it.
So
As a valuer, you know, when you talk about a property that has a title and the one that doesn't have a title, it comes at a very significant margin of adjustment.
Okay.
Now, when a building is green and it is not green, it comes at that same level of consideration. So if I'm valuing a building with a green future today, I will treat it more like I'm treating a building with a title and without a title.
So amongst your clients, it's not necessarily, but as an investment, it is going to have longer term value.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Real quick, Tope, as a developer, are you having more demand for green? Are you looking to incorporate that into your designs?
Absolutely. We are getting a lot more demand, and the designs that we're beginning to churn out are taking heavily into consideration meeting green requirements. And, you know, there's the side of the being a responsible organization, seeing what we're seeing, floods and all of that. But there's also something to having bragging rights. And so whatever the reason is right now, you know, just being able to put that badge, green building, you know, it differentiates you from your competitors right now. So even if you're not completely understanding the full gamut of what the climate and the environmental thing is talking about, just because you want to be able to come for next year's WAPI and say, oh, I have a green building, whatever that is worth, we are beginning to see that that is beginning to matter. And, and because it's mattering, it means that we are changing. So whatever the reason is for us changing, what is important is that we're changing and the trend is changing. Yeah.
Great. Okay, I'm actually going to, because I know I'm being put on out of, I know I've run out of time, so I want to say thank you so much. I mean, one of the things, and I'll just put in a plug on this because those who know me, spent quite a bit of time trying to learn more, and I know there is a session coming up with IFC, with EDGE. The whole idea is finding affordable green solutions in emerging markets, and those are being discovered. So it's to encourage each and every one of us in the ecosystem to find those kind of solutions for us, for our clients, and for our future. And with that, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we please applaud this stellar panel for their insightful and engaging conversation? So of a truth, technology has enabled the real estate sector, especially with efficiency, and we must find a way, or more creative ways actually, to bring tenants and clients on board. Thank you very much again for that conversation.